Welcome to Podlygamists, the Sisterwives Rewatch podcast.
Sisterwives is a reality show centered on a Mormon polygamous family originating in Lehi, Utah. Over 12 years and 16 seasons, TLC's longest-running reality show tells the story of Cody Brown and his 4 wives, Mary, Janelle, Christine, and Robin, and their journey as spouses and parents living plural marriage in the public eye. As superfans, we have watched the family as they grow and overcome challenges, endure numerous moves, face loss, and celebrate all the moments in between. We love the Brown family, and fresh off some major changes following season 16, we decided to go back to the beginning and embark on the ultimate rewatch so that we could see the early days with fresh eyes and try to draw connections between the Brown family of 2010 and where we are today. I'm Samantha Kaiser.
And I'm Hailey Graff.
And this is Podlygamists, bonus episode, Under the Banner of Heaven, book discussion, part 2.
Welcome back to part 2. This is going to cover the crime side of Under the Banner of Heaven, which is my podcast sweet spot, I feel like, a little bit. I mean, and now I understand when all the podcasters of those crime shows talk about how it can be too much and they get too into it and they get it's a little dark. And this is just a quick trigger warning. This book, it gets into a lot of explicit sexually and physically violent content. This section is going to cover the crime specifically, and we try to keep it light, but there are, not light, but we try not to get into all the gory details too much, but just a heads up if any of that sounds concerning to you, maybe just wait for our next Sisterwives episode. But yeah, when you're in balls deep in the research, it is a little bit man, this
balls deep in the research.
I gotta leave out some details about the graphic murder of this infant and that kind of stuff. But it's this whole internal conflict of it's not needed for the story, but is it not is it not giving her memory some sort of validation? I don't know. But now I have a new respect for our true crime podcasters out there who do this all the time. I don't know that I could. I guess I'll get started if you're ready.
Yeah, I'm all set for you.
Okay. On July 24th, 1984, in American Fork, Utah, Alan Lafferty leaves his home to drive 80 miles to his work site in Ogden, Utah. He's a tile setter by profession. At lunch, he calls home to his wife, Brenda, and he talks, kind of quote unquote, to his baby daughter, Erica, as well, who's kind of babbling, I guess, and talking on the phone. She's 15 months old. At 8 p.m., he arrives home, and he finds that his front door is locked, which is strange because they never lock their door. He then uses his key to unlock the door, and when he comes in, he's surprised to find that the TV's blaring and a baseball game is on, which neither he or his wife, Brenda, are a fan of baseball, so it just seems strange. He found that other than the TV, his apartment was really quiet, which was unusual. He kind of looks over to see if maybe Brenda has gone to the neighbor's house with the baby just for a visit, and when he looks over, he does notice that there is blood on the wall near their light switch. From there, he kind of follows his gaze and looks into the kitchen doorway and sees that Brenda is sprawled on the floor in a pool of blood. Alan says he calls her name and touches her shoulder and found that she was cool to the touch. She was covered in blood. Her face, her body was covered in blood. He reaches for the phone and finds the cord has been yanked from the wall. So then he goes to his bedroom to grab their bed phone. I guess their bedroom phone.
Right.
On the way there, he sees that his baby daughter, Erica, in her crib. She's slumped in an odd position and is motionless. She's in just her diaper and is soaked in blood as well. So he does reach their bedroom phone, but finds that too is out of order. So he finally gets over to the neighbor's house, calls 911, and then calls his mother. He went back home and prayed over Brenda. It was then that he realized there must have been a pretty serious struggle that she went through before her death, because there's blood everywhere throughout the house, on the walls, curtains. When the cops arrive, of course, they grill Alan because he's suspected to be the killer. It's just kind of first, it's kind of You want to say the
In
joke?
all the true crime stories you hear, it's always the husband, so obviously you're going to suspect them first.
Right. In this case, while it wasn't Alan, he does know who the killers were. He's quite certain who the killers were, and he shares that information with the police. So now we'll kind of get into to our cast of characters. Now, like setting that scene, I guess. So the Lafferty family consists of 8 children, and that's 6 boys and 2 girls. The parents are Watson and Claudine Lafferty. They are a devout Mormon family that is kind of known around town, around the county, for their work ethic and their intense devotion to their the Mormon Church, the mainstream LDS Mormon Church.
So that should be noted then, the mainstream Mormon Church, so they're not polygamists, the parents.
Nope.
So
they are pretty hardcore. Like they're not into government generally. They're very into like they have their own kind of homestead with their food. They try to grow their own food and that kind of thing. The father sounds to be strict. And like I said, they're just very conservative Mormon. But they're known, but in this area where it's a very Mormon area, they're like kind of looked up to as like a really great stand-up Mormon family. And they're well regarded in the community. The Lafferty boys, specifically, the book calls out, are kind of like famous in this community. The story focuses on 3 of the Watson boys. Alan, who we already kind of met, he's the youngest. There's Ron, who is actually, his first name is Watson after his father. But he goes by Ron, so just when we're referring to him throughout, we'll call him Ron. And as does the book. And then Dan, who is the I'm screwing up the birth order too. Dan, who is
the second oldest?
Okay, Ron is the oldest, named after that makes sense. Ron is the oldest, named after his father. Dan is 6 years younger. I don't know where he is in the grand order of this family. I'm sure if they're Mormon, they probably have kids in between those 6 years.
One after another.
But it wasn't really listed out, and it's not really important because the rest don't come up a whole bunch in the retelling of it.
Really, the 3 of them, the 3 matter: Dan, Ron, and Alan.
Yep. And again, Alan's the youngest, Ron's the oldest, Dan is somewhere in the middle, I guess. So again, Alan's the youngest brother. He's married to Brenda Wright. Brenda is a former beauty queen, a news anchor in Utah. Former news anchor. She gave up her career to be with Alan and have children. And her friends and family describe her as a strong and educated woman. Although it's kind of contradictory to her husband's very traditional old school beliefs, and their family is kind of very conservative beliefs in general. She spoke out against them when she felt something was wrong. She was very comfortable speaking her mind and standing up for herself. And she was 24 when she was murdered.
Do we know was she Mormon prior to?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, she was, and she just wasn't as like hardcore as the Laffertys.
She, it doesn't. I didn't get a lot about her personal background. However, I do have a little bit in this article from crematorium.com that was helpful in like structuring this kind of summary because man, there's so much in that book, and this helped me kind of focus on what points should be important. So Brenda, she grew up in Kimberly, Idaho. She had 5 sisters and 1 brother. They were a close LDS family.
Okay.
Described as funny, energetic, bubbly, smart, and driven. So it's, if I had to wager, I guess, the fact that she had kind of the reverse of what the Laffertys had, where she had 5 sisters and 1 brother, maybe, just a strong female was just not as crazy. If they have so many girls and 1 brother, they're gonna value their place in the world maybe a little.
And 2, because she was in broadcast journalism and stuff, so it was like her career was really important to her, and she was like, she looked up to some local journalist or something that went to the same school as her. So she had strong like female role models in her life and career wise.
Yeah. I mean, it says here too, she also aspired to write children's books. Like she was not she was driven for and like had a lot to like offer. It sounds like they have just like such sweet things to say of her mother and sisters and stuff who visited her often while she was living with Alan. But yeah, I mean, being a broadcast journalist too, that exposes you to things in the world that maybe that not everybody, you're just into current events and news and things like that more so than maybe the average woman in this culture would have been, especially this is the 80s. So it's just also just a different time. There's not as much information readily available. I could see how just her life experience kind of primed her to be just different than
A
what
little
this
more modern, probably.
than what this family was used to or wanted per se.
Yeah.
Yeah, she had a degree as well, which is also something that stands out.
Oh yeah, definitely. Even for any woman in like the 80s and stuff, that's significant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's kind of crazy to imagine that she was only 24 when she was killed.
God, yeah.
I mean, that's younger than both of us. And she accomplished a lot. The fact that she had a career already and like already had these dreams and things like,
yeah,
that's 2 years out of college for the average graduate. Like that's crazy.
Me at 24 working my part-time jobs to try to make ends meet. Like,
yeah,
a little different than her being, having a broadcast journalism career.
Already had a career to give up. Like that's crazy.
Yeah.
Not many can say that, I don't think.
Yeah.
So, anyways, getting back into the Lafferty boys, then the other two main that we focus on again are Dan and Ron, the older brothers. Ron is the oldest brother and the leader of the family. He was at one time a Highland County councilman until his religious faith veered a little too fundamentalist for even Highland County, which I looked up is 93.3% LDS population.
Oh man, okay.
Today, so I almost would imagine it's gone down a hair. But
right. They can't grow too much more, so.
And Ron is married to Diana, and they had 6 kids, and noted like well known for having a really great marriage and a great friendship. Those two at the beginning. A lot of like the anecdotes in the book talk about how they had a very respectful relationship for a long time. Dan Lafferty was 6 years younger than Ron. And while he was a Mormon missionary in Scotland, he met his wife Matilda, who had 2 daughters from a previous marriage, and then they also had another daughter of their own. Dan went to school intending to be a chiropractor like his father, but after an altercation with the health department, while he and Matilda were running a sandwich shop out of their home to kind of pay the bills, they had a sort of a under-the-table sandwich shop, I guess. And
like random at-home business, I think. Like, yeah, we sell sandwiches out of our home.
Like, Sam, what kind of sandwiches are we talking? I'm just picturing, like,
they're like good. They were good.
Bread and, like, cheese and, you know what I mean? I'm
not just slap a, like, American cheese slice on there.
And, like, who's going to buy these sandwiches?
Yeah, I'm not going to drive up to just, like, a home and be like, ham and cheese, please.
Yeah, this famous sandwiches.
But I guess hopefully they were good. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, supposedly they were like making the ends meet with these sandwiches and getting through college by making these sandwiches.
That's insane.
So it was kind of their like livelihood at the time as a young couple. But the health department did catch wind of their little operation and shut them down, and that's kind of the turning point for Dan when he becomes extremely anti-government. He returned his own driver's license back to the state because he didn't want to be. He basically revoked his own license and refused to pay any taxes, including sales tax, which I can only imagine that poor cashier who had to deal with this shit. Like, what?
It's just like some 15-year-old who's like, okay, and it's $3.95 tax, and he's like, nope. Not gonna.
Yeah, and he's like, excuse me, please hand me the receipt and I'll pay you, the $3.50 or whatever, and I'm gonna keep my 15 cents because screw it.
It's interesting at our work where we get phone calls, and there are often people that we talk to on the phone who are like, break it down to me exactly how much is sales tax and the product and the shipping. And I mean, like you have to itemize it over the phone to them. So that in itself is super annoying. So then imagine it in person, it's just like a grocery store, and they're like, I can't just subtract the tax because you don't believe in it or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I had a job at Target. Granted, this was like 2013-ish, so different time.
Mm-hmm.
But I can only imagine my busy day. You're just swiping. My swipe. They have a meter that gauges like how quickly you scan. There's like a score that you're getting as you're scanning.
Oh my god.
Well, they like talk to you about it. I can only imagine just struggling through that day, and then having this asshole show up and say and give me a hard time about the sales tax. Like,
like that's the last thing I need today.
Yeah. So I don't know. Interesting little detail. The thing about returning the license really that really paints a picture. I mean,
it should be noted that he continued driving despite the fact that he didn't have a valid license or didn't have a license at all.
There's also that fun little tidbit about how he ignored speed limits and drove at what he felt was a reasonable speed. So I can only imagine the tickets that would rack up for this gentleman. Driving expired, I'm sure, expired plates, if any plates, because that's another connection.
Right.
No license, driving the speed limit that he feels is appropriate, and then that being that officer who has to deal with that shit show as well.
But then he probably was getting these tickets and like, no, I'm not going to pay them.
Yeah.
Government, like.
Exactly. I mean, there's also a bit, I didn't cover this because, oh man, there's so much to cover. But there's also the bit about how his father went away on a mission, I believe. And,
oh God, yeah.
Watson Sr. Went away on a mission and found out that they were having their property taken away because he was refusing to pay the property taxes at the time. And like I said, he was also a conservative Mormon gentleman, but even he was like, dude,
come on now.
Pay the property taxes so I can keep our family farm.
Like, sorry, I don't want to be kicked out on the street when I come home from this mission because you refuse to pay property taxes because of principle.
Yeah, on my behalf too. Not even on
not even your own property.
Taxes, Dan. Like, don't. just. I will pay the taxes. Don't worry about it. But yeah,
he's nuts.
So while these antics were funny, I guess, in a way. I mean, I found them amusing. Right. They do take a turn when Dan kind of first begins to deviate from the traditional LDS teachings of he's a very devout Mormon follower, has a lot of love for the church, but he felt that they had strayed from their original teachings, particularly in one category. Can you guess?
I think we have an idea.
Yeah, you guessed it, polygamy.
Always that polygamy comes back to polygamy.
It's funny how that's kind of the starkest difference between these two ways of being, but it is the one that all these types of people at the hill they will die on is they want more than one wife.
The hill they will die on. I need multiple wives.
And if only they had Cody Brown, then maybe they would have watched a few seasons of Sisterwives and changed their mind,
Right. And actually, I don't know if it's working out so well. He doesn't seem that happy in later seasons, so
he's not just getting all kinds of ladies. It doesn't end there.
A little bit more involved than that.
A lot more involved than that. So yeah. So he kind of begins to hold his own weekly meetings from home for men. And that mostly consisted of Lafferty men, which they called the School of Prophets. Alan was a regular attendee of these meetings, and he tried to implement the kind of fundamentalist ideologies that were discussed in his own home, which kind of included the women should stay at home with the children and be open to the practice of polygamy. Of course, anti-government works its way in there. I don't know that Joe Smith was could have foreseen all the functions of government that we have today, but I guess they decided that was kind of a natural progression.
Right.
So Brenda, however, was not open to this proposed lifestyle change. Brenda's opposition led to tension between herself and the rest of the Lafferty clan. When Brenda's family was interviewed, they said that during times when they would visit Brenda, she would constantly be keeping watch on Alan, questioning him, where he's been, who he's been talking to. And whenever she could, she accompanied him on outings to make sure no fishy business was going on with the School of Prophets and his connection. I think she kind of forbade him from being a part of this community, and she was kind of it just like paints such a picture of her like having to quit, and also like impressive. It's so impressive because this family of all these men who are so opinionated and so like defiant in what they believe, and she's like, stay away from them. Where were you? What were you doing? I'm going with you. Like all this stuff, and her willingness to do that, I guess, just really points to like how strong she really was, because she was not afraid to put herself between her husband and his entire huge family of kind of.
And his family who is like going against the government. I mean, they're not just going against like their own wives, which in itself again is going to be problematic in their relationships and stuff. But I mean, they're going against law enforcement. He's sending his license back. And so then she's standing up to these men who are
not afraid of the government. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, she had some tenacity. My goodness. Like,
I know. It just, I'm sure, part of me is like, there's a lot of times when someone has passed away or has been killed, there's a lot of like, probably rosy retrospection. But like for this, I'm like, there's no room for that. Like the facts are that she put herself between Alan and the family, and it ended her life. Like we'll get there. But like, this was an incredibly impressive woman. So
I think she sounded like a badass. So
yeah.
And it's just such a shame that things ended the way they did, because what a person that we're missing from the world.
And from her own community too, like she still was Mormon and believed in those principles. Like she could have been such a powerful role model in the church of someone who doesn't have to like reject all of that to be strong and powerful. Like she can still have her beliefs, but still like believe in the rights of herself and the women in the community and like beyond that. So I don't know.
And I think any religion, any organization needs that. So that is such a loss. Like
it's hard to like kind of wrap your head around what a powerhouse she was. But so again, when their family interviews, they talk about how she was, when her sisters would visit, they would always have to stick around Alan, make sure he knew what was going on, or they knew what he was up to and stuff. It sounds like none of the wives of the Lafferty men were supportive of these changes, from what we were gathered from the book. But Brenda was the outspoken kind of defender of the other women, even though she was 24, the youngest of all the wives.
Yeah, the youngest
and newest to the family. Like she just was like she had no fear.
Yeah.
She defended them and counseled them over the phone that they did not have to accept these changes, and encouraged them to speak up against their husbands. And of course, Brenda became the scapegoat in the eyes of Ron and Dan for the obstacle that their family was facing. Like she was the staying between them and their perfect like following and faith of their beliefs, I guess. So Matilda is Dan's wife. Her last straw in all of this came when Dan announced that he intended to take his stepdaughter as his plural wife, and she was 14. It was then, after also some allegations of sexual abuse, that Dan was excommunicated from the Mormon Church. Dan did later take a plural wife who was an immigrant from Romania named Anne Randak. She was like she was like a helper. She was employed by like a friend of theirs or something. She helped care for someone's land or farm.
How freaking random though, too.
Yeah.
There's this lady, like, I'm just gonna marry her in, whatever.
I know. I would love a lot more information on her.
Yeah, like, what was why would she be like, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Also, initially when they say immigrant from Romania, I'm like, oh, like mail order or like 90 Day Fiance type situation. Nope, just she knew
was just here.
She was into it, I guess. I don't know.
Like, all right, whatever.
So Ron Lafferty was also an attendee of the School of Prophets and was considered kind of a leader. Ron claimed to receive revelations from God. It was one of these revelations referred to as the revelation of removal, which Ron claimed God called upon him to, quote, remove Brenda, the baby, and in addition to them, Chloe Lowe and Richard Stowe. He claimed that they should be made an example of what happens, for others to see what happens what their fate is when they disobey God's command, I guess, or calling. Chloe Lowe and Richard Stowe were neighbors and friends of Ron and Diana, and they had been supportive of Diana when she had begun to question Ron, and eventually she took their children and left him because his beliefs had become too extreme. Richard Stowe.
Thank God she did. I mean, it could have ended up bad for her and her kids.
You gotta wonder how much of that was because Brenda gave her the strength to do that,
You just wish that Brenda did the same.
Well, she might have saved all their lives. I mean, I know it's I do wonder, I know we don't have this information. It seems like Alan was a bit tight-lipped. We don't have that much on their conflict and their whole deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we didn't learn as much about their relationship. I mean, that she's kind of at a breaking point where she kind of wants to leave because of his family and how he's getting involved. But, I mean, what was he like personally to her? What was their relationship like?
How much was he this is my belief too, and I'm going to enforce it too? Or was he yeah, you're right, Brenda? How, was he going with her? Was he, I would love to know, the dynamic of that.
And I don't know if Alan's ever really spoken publicly about it. It doesn't seem that way, which, I mean, I guess I don't blame him because that's a pretty shit thing that happened in his life. But my goodness, I would have liked to have known what their relationship was like when it was just the two of them.
It's interesting, and I guess we just won't ever know unless he speaks up and we believe him, So Richard Stowe also had presided over Ron's excommunication from the Mormon Church. So put another target on his back. After both their marriages had crumbled, Dan and Ron went on an extended road trip together out west in Ron's green Impala station wagon, and they were kind of living in that van or in that vehicle. So back to the night of July 24th of 1984. Dan, Ron, Ricky Knapp, and Chip Carnes, who are two men that the brothers picked up while hitchhiking on their travels, loaded up knives, a sawed-off shotgun, and ammunition, and headed to Alan and Erica's duplex. They arrived around 1:30 and pulled into the driveway. It was noted that Brenda's car was there. Ron got out and went to the door alone. He was carrying the sawed-off shotgun up his right-hand sleeve, and his knife was in his boot. Ron opened the screen door and knocked several times, and there was no answer. Dan reported that he had been relieved, thinking that this was a test of faith from God, and that they didn't really have to go through with it. They'd passed the test like Abraham of the Old Testament, who I believe was called to sacrifice his son. So Ron kind of shrugged, so after Dan kind of determined that this was a test of faith and that they didn't really have to go through with it, Ron just kind of shrugged and they all got back in the car. So Ron was the one who had gone to the door. There was no answer. Dan was kind of thinking that through, this must have been a test of faith, like Abraham. Ron at the door was like, all right, I guess so. Shrugged, got back in the car. Dan was the driver. He drove a block and a half away when he claimed he was overcome by a weird feeling that he should go back to Alan and Brenda's. He surmised that perhaps he was the one that was supposed to fulfill the removal revelation from God that Ron had received. Interesting.
Oh, God.
That's a real... it was almost didn't happen. It was this close. It didn't happen. You know what I mean?
And what kind of weird feeling did you have? I mean, to be like, no, actually, I think I've got to be the one to do this. You were already gone. You already left.
It wasn't even his revelation. He was just nope, this is my, this is me turning.
What is that line of thinking? Where does that come from?
I mean, we'll get into.
Yeah, I mean, we'll discuss it, but.
And that's a real, I mean, red flag is an understatement, but that's a real, put a pin in that because that is insane.
Significant.
Yeah. This isn't just your brother's psychosis of imagining God. This is you deciding now it's me who has to be the righteous one to take on. Yeah. So yeah. Anyways. So then Dan does turn the car back around to Alan and Brenda's. He steps out of the car and knocks, and this time Brenda does answer. He began by asking her where Alan was, and she stated that he was at work. Dan recalled that he was silently talking to God and wondering what to do next. After a few seconds, he did push past Brenda and entered the duplex, and Brenda must have known that was going to happen. Something bad was about to happen. And she said to Dan, or Dan claims she said to him, "I knew you were going to do something that nobody could stop." So Ron eventually made his way to the duplex and saw what was going on as well. So Dan had entered. Ron then followed. Dan had Brenda pinned to the floor, and she tried to reason with both of them, saying she would do anything they wanted and begged them not to hurt her, or especially her baby. I really summarize what happens here because it's graphic and it's really prolonged, and I don't think it's crucial to the story. But basically, Ron beats Brenda, all while insulting her and calling her a liar. Without rehashing again the gory details, they basically strangled and then stabbed her. She did fight, and there was she regains consciousness. All these terrible things happen, and she's still fighting, like down to the very last possible second. And then they went and they did kill baby Erica in her crib. So Knapp
and your own niece, Yeah.
And there's a horrifying account he kind of shares that he enters the room and he thinks that the baby must have thought that it was her dad because he had a beard like her dad, and I'm sure they looked alike, so she reached for him the way. Yeah, it's and he just recounts the story to whoever reporter or whatever. It's just the most disturbing thing, and I guess he kind of also debated whether or not he needed to kill her, and it had to do because they decided it was more humane because they had killed the mother. So during this, Knapp and Carnes are waiting in the car. They were able to hear some of the commotion, but then suddenly it did go quiet. They became nervous about being involved in this crime and contemplated leaving with the car, but after some reasoning, they decided against that. So they did leave the duplex covered in blood, the Dan and Ron did. They debated changing their clothes, but they figured, we're on our way to go kill Chloe and Richard, so why waste the clean laundry? So they do get back in the car covered in blood. They intended to finish God's will, quote in quotes, making that clear, by going on to kill the other two people in Ron's revelation, Chloe Lowe and Richard Stowe. The brothers arrive at Chloe Lowe's home intending to murder her, and then knocked on the door to find nobody home. Ron and Dan broke in, stealing some things and wandering around for a while, but then they left. They felt that they had done enough for the Lord that day and decided they decided not to go to Robert Stowe's home. All in a day's work. After Alan had arrived home and reported to the police that his brothers had been the ones to murder his wife and child, an APB went out for Ron's pale green 74 Impala. Then on August 7th, info from a lead led police to Reno, Nevada, where the brothers were arrested standing in a buffet line at the Circus Casino. Which is, horror aside, quite comical. Quite a comical, you can just picture these, I picture them to be overweight. They may not be, but they just picture these, greasy old losers standing in line for a buffet, just, thumbs in their asses, and then the police close in on them. I don't know the visual. I'm curious. That'll be a good.
I really hope it was like that.
Yeah, just picking their noses, oblivious, ready for their buffet at the casino in Reno, and they just swarm it.
Loading up on the buffet.
They were on the run for a couple weeks, but luckily someone reported them and they were found in Nevada. So they did initially try to protest their innocence from jail. They claimed they couldn't get a fair trial in Utah because it was run by Mormons and they were the enemies or whatever. Which, correct, the government in Utah is run by Mormons. Yes, you're also Mormons, dum-dum. They were unsuccessful. And then Dan did later issue a written statement to the media that he was not guilty. They admitted to the killing, but not to the murder.
And tell me what the difference is.
Well, since it was God's will, it couldn't be a crime.
Sure.
They did, take knives and kill people, but killing is not murder, and it's not a crime if it's God's will, according to Christ. So,
well, isn't that convenient?
Isn't it? Yeah. So anyways, they're in prison for a while, awaiting trial, and later in December, when Dan was taken from his cell for questioning, Ron attempted to hang himself. His heart did stop beating, and he stopped breathing for 15 minutes. The paramedics were able to get his heart beating again, and after 2 days in a coma, he did regain consciousness. Unfortunately, well, yes, I want this like shithead to stand trial.
Yeah.
It gave these idiots ammunition to say this is God's will, this was divine intervention, I'm not meant to die, like God saved me because I'm a righteous servant, whatever bullshit. Fun fact, deviating from that little bit dark side note, I guess. Um, their cellmate was Mark Kaufman, who was another famously featured in Murder Among the Mormons, a documentary on Netflix about how he basically it's a bombing and he kills. I haven't actually watched it. I have heard some episodes of other like murder podcasts about it. Mark Hoffman's an interesting guy because like allegedly he was actually an atheist and his whole deal was that he was a fraudster, kind of trying to like embarrass or disprove Mormonism by like claiming that he found some holy texts and that the plates. But there's other. I can't remember.
You want some new plates?
There's a salamander involved. That like speaks to him or something. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I'll look up Mark Hoffman for sure.
So, anyways, Dan was first tried, and he was tried alone to allow Ron time to recover and undergo a psychiatric evaluation to determine if he was brain damaged at all from his injury, I guess.
His near-death experience.
Yeah. Dan, like a psychopath, represents himself and told the jurors to impose the death penalty.
I think all Satan people represent themselves in court.
Yeah, I mean, he's clearly kind of a jack of all trades.
Sure.
If he can speak to God, I guess God's probably your best counsel. So, like,
God as your lawyer, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just the mouth,
can't go wrong.
Makes a lot of sense. He was given 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Again, after he told the jurors to impose the death penalty.
Well, I mean, because he said, he fully said that he did it. Like it was Ron's stupid revelation or whatever, but Dan said that he was the one who did it. So,
and he had no problem admitting it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got some sort of special brand of psychosis because, like, yeah. Ron was also given the death penalty as he was seen as the instigator. Criminals back then had the choice of how they wanted to be executed, and he chose a firing squad.
Which I did not know was a possibility.
It's like really, again, cinematic. Like I don't. I guess I've heard some terrible things about lethal injection and the electrocution. Yeah. Maybe that's a choice I would also pick.
I don't know. I don't know that I'd choose a firing squad. Like that seems like, I don't know. I mean, I just didn't know that was an option.
No, I did not either. I feel that seems very old west, out west Utah.
Yeah.
The 2 hitchhikers, Chip Carnes and Ricky Knapp, originally faced the same murder charges in the case, but agreed to testify for the state and plead guilty to reduced sentence. So that's kind of the end of their tale, but just a little like epilogue, you could say. In 2008, a woman named Christy Strack began writing to Dan Lafferty in prison. She was only 8 when he committed the crime, but after she read about the case, she became enamored with him in his teachings.
What?
In 2008, she contacted his daughter Rebecca to arrange for a meeting with him. Soon, she and her husband Benjamin began visiting Dan in prison. They would talk about the end of the world, life, families, and religious philosophies, as one does. Just a little coffee chat.
Oh my God.
Dan claims that he and Christy fell in love with Benjamin's knowledge, and Benjamin was okay with it. Oh, because I should read that. Dan and Christy claim that they fell in love, and Benjamin was aware, and he was A-okay.
No.
The last time Dan saw them in 2014, he had cut off his long hair and beard and given it to Christy. He had even indicated that he wanted his ashes to go to Christy when he died. Christy often expressed her thoughts about taking her life and that of her kids in order to leave the evil world behind, and due to her fear of a pending apocalypse, Dan encouraged her to do so.
Oh my god.
It doesn't end there.
Oh my god.
Worse. On September 27th, 2014, Christy and Ben gave 3 of their 4 children a lethal mixture of methadone, prescription medication, and cough syrup, and they ingested themselves as well. Their bodies were found later by Christy's oldest son from a previous marriage, who wasn't in the home at the time of their deaths. Dan proudly takes credit for the family's demise. Dan sucks.
Good how, Dan?
Ron might be crazy, but Dan sucks majorly.
Evil, man. What?
They're both evil. Yeah.
Yep. Why would this lady do that?
She was unwell.
Well, clearly. But oh my god.
As was her husband.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. So okay, so this piece of shit though is in prison for life and on death row or whatever, and he still manages to do that damage.
Yeah. Ronald Watson Lafferty died in prison on November 11th of 2019 of natural causes.
Natural causes?
Yep. He spent 34 years on death row.
Wow. Mm-hmm. And natural causes did it.
Dan Lafferty is 72 and serving out his life sentence at the Utah State Prison in Draper, Utah. He doesn't get many visitors from his family, if any. He stated in an interview that the killing of Brenda and Erica never haunted or bothered him.
That makes me sick.
Yeah. Yeah, it's dark. It's really dark. And that's the end of, all my notes and things.
But, I mean, we can talk about how the brothers probably are narcissists. And that's been discussed in the book. I don't know exactly how you can definitively diagnose that.
Yeah.
But it definitely seems that they, at the very bare minimum, have narcissistic tendencies.
Yeah. Yeah. The perfect, horrible cocktail, the fact that it was Ron's revelation to murder someone. He was going to murder someone. And Dan is not only signing off on it, but he feels okay with taking that over as his own calling.
Yeah.
It's
like sort of a shared psychosis, though. Because, I mean, it's more than one person believing in this murderous revelation from God and that you should enact this. It's not just one guy who's clinically ill. It's multiple people. And even the ones who are in the car with them, they're sidekicks, who didn't actually physically commit a murder. Mm-hmm. But I mean, they still were along for the ride. I mean, what does that say, though? That's a kind of shared psychosis, I would think.
Yes. I texted you the term messaged you the term that I'm trying to pronounce. Polyauduo. It's that's kind of like a shared mind of psychosis.
Oh.
I don't know. There's some true crime about that as well. But yeah, it is. It's a crazy coincidence. It's a crazy perfect storm of terrible circumstances and people who enabled. I mean, there's no clear answer on this, but it's possible that Alan had heard the revelation at one of these meetings.
Honestly, I feel like how could he not have? I mean, they were in this school together and nobody, I mean, other people besides Rod and Dan heard this revelation and never bothered to tell Brenda.
I mean, there's also the I didn't get into this either. It's just there's so much, but the prophet Onias, who was a gentleman who knew and befriended these guys and heard the revelation and didn't act on anything to prevent it. He has regrets about it. He's debatably a character amongst himself. which is why I just couldn't even start to get into him because like he's just fascinating and like kind of like jovial fella, like he just, but with like also some of these same kind of twisted beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
But he heard the revelation and didn't act on anything to prevent it. Yeah, at least
I mean,
we know at least he heard the revelation and did not act on it at the very bare minimum. So
and that's one of like we've put out some discussion questions like on Instagram and stuff, and one of them is, would you consider the brothers to be insane? Would you agree that they suffer from narcissism?
yeah,
I feel like how could you not? Like, I don't know what else to kind of diagnose them, so to speak, with. Like,
yeah. I mean, we talked about it, I think, in the last episode too. Anybody who feels like they, again, to varying degrees, but anybody who feels like they should be leading people, especially as like a religious leader,
mhm.
or like a mouth, even more so. I'll even make it more specific: a mouthpiece of God, that receives direct revelations. You just gotta kind of assume like there's narcissism in the mix. And like again, we talked about how some professions need a level of narcissism in order to be like successful. Um, but yeah, I think that's an easy sign off on that particular.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah.
Yeah. What were some of the other questions we had queued up for this section?
Should Ron Lafferty be considered mentally ill? If so, should all others who quote talk to God or receive revelations be considered mentally ill? And then what would be the legal ramifications of such a shift in thought? Which that's a really heavy question, I think.
Yeah. I mean, here's what I'm gonna say, just to like be clear, I guess, to the listener, to whoever. There's a lot of questions I think are important to consider that aren't. It's not an accusation. It's just a thought experiment sometimes to think about these things. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because then, if by that logic of that question, anybody who prays would be considered
Right.
insane. And I don't agree with that. I'm sure some people would agree with that statement. I have no doubt about that. Because that's talking to God in most cases is a prayer. So no. However, I can see legally why that's complicated because if you're agreeing that we can talk to God, who's to say what God is telling you versus this guy and that it wasn't justified by God? Like hard to argue with that with God. If, you know. I mean, I think obviously the legal parameters come in when there's crimes being committed and harm being done. Then yeah, like that's we're not gonna. That's not a faith I have where anybody's being called upon to murder, take someone's life. That is not, But yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm going to read Dalton G., our correspondent on the ground. We're going to read, I'm going to read some of his response to talk about. So he was saying, with this, he's like, Ron and Dan literally killed the person and convinced themselves it was because God told them to. He said that is mentally ill behavior, but just talking to God, as long as you're not like acting on it or doing harm to others, he's like, I don't think that part is mentally ill. He's like, I think that they're talking to God, or they're saying that God told them to kill, was a way to absolve themselves of responsibility. He's like, this is a tough one though. It's kind of like you have to go on a case by case basis. Like there isn't really a way to do a blanket policy of it's a normal act of faith versus mental illness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think if we're going to look at it like really black and white, yeah, it's when there's harm done, is when it no longer is like something you can just do.
Because I've known people too that have been like, God has called me to do this in my life, and I wouldn't call those people insane, by any means. I would say that they just felt drawn to something, and if they believe in themselves that God was the one drawing them, or if it's their own innate being, I don't care. Doesn't really matter to me if they believe that God told them to or not. It doesn't affect me at all. But as long as it's not hurting anybody,
Yeah.
like there has to be that line there, though. Like, okay, God told me, God's drawing me to just go kill so and so. Well, no, no. That's not a thing. You can't do that. But like God's calling me to be a doctor. God's calling me to go into teaching.
Yeah.
That I don't think is it's so hard though to just differentiate. It's you could talk for hours about it.
Talk for hours and just say so little too, because really we're just saying the same thing over and over.
Exactly.
Like, but it's like it's just hard to like personally delineate. Like, I think it's a personal boundary beyond crime, beyond like murder or harm to another person and their rights or their being. It's a personal line, so like it's kind of up to the discretion of the person.
So this one, I guess, why do you think what do you think our society's fascination with polygamy is? Because I mean, think about it. How many people do tune in to Sisterwives? Or like there is the fictionalized show Big Love, I think on HBO. I don't know.
I think it was HBO or Showtime.
And there's Surviving Sisterwives, I think is a show, or Seeking Sisterwives. I don't, whatever it is on TLC too.
Another TLC.
Yeah. So society clearly has a fascination with it. Like, what do you think that's about? Why?
So just a little supporting argument for that. Season 14 of Sisterwives ended strong on April 12th, 2020 with 2,381,000 viewers tuning in, according to the show Buzz Daily.
Wow.
So, just to like put a number on that audience.
Yeah.
I think we generally, anything that's taboo is really interesting to us. And also in the United States, with like a very like conservative view on relationships, it's so counter to that that it just is even more like intriguing and like scandalized. So, and the fact that they are also a conservative religion,
right?
It's not that they're all
a little at odds.
Yeah, but that is a real like strong like different stance on that kind of belief system. So, anyways, I think I think it's like so conflicting, so mixed messages that it's just like fascinating. Just the way that like any people love to learn about cults and stuff. Again, someday someone's gonna like send me some real hate mail for continuing to mention cults in these episodes, but it's just the counterculture that is interesting, I think.
Right. I think so too. And again, I'll talk with Dalton G. What he said. He said the same thing. He's like, I think it's for the same reasons that things like 50 Shades of Grey became popular.
Yeah.
Like it is that taboo. It is like, oh, people don't talk about the BDSM or what, people don't talk about polygamy. Like it's, and we've seen historically too, like we talked about in the book, that like the American public was fascinated by it, has been for hundreds of years now that it's been going on, but they also are like, oh, but it's morally not okay, but you're still like, but I kind of want to know about it.
Yeah. I mean, that really like sparked another thought that I'm trying to think if I want to like go down this rabbit hole too of like so often the things that we like so reject are like thou doth protest too much kind of thing. Like you want like your id is like give me that of that like scandalized taboo. It's like got like a sexual element to it that people's like mind kind of wander to. I think the plural marriage. So like I think anything that kind of like lights up your id or like the male in power who like so vehemently rejects things. Like, I mean, it's not just males, especially now, but who so much rejects these things. Like, it's because they're a little bit too interested in it themselves. I don't know. That's just kind of.
I could go down another rabbit hole too, but thinking like how guys are very like homophobic, and then but they're a little bit interested in it too.
So quick to the no homo, to the this, to the that.
Yeah, no homo, but like I also want to like
that guy must be such a great
affection to my guy.
Yeah. Like,
It might be something along those lines.
Yeah,
like
that's kind of the same train I was thinking about a little bit.
Yeah.
That it's not like a well thought out thought.
Yeah, I don't know how to say it completely properly, I guess, but yeah.
We're on the same page though. And
Yeah.
the listener who knows will know what I mean.
Yeah. So you either get it or you don't, whatever.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, we did it. Our first double episode week. I mean, probably if we get this out on time. So
I'll get it. I'll get it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for tuning in. Please still continue to share any thoughts you have about now that we've discussed it ourselves. If you have more discussion, and we'll be returning next week with back to season 2 of Sisterwives.
April 19th, I think it is. We'll start season 2.
Awesome. I'm excited to get back into some kind of lighter, kind of like fluffier content. And I think the season's actually going to be a really good one, discussion-wise. So yeah, I mean, those of you who've been like waiting around for us to get back to the good stuff, I'm
just a few more days.
I'm ready as well. I'm ready for some mindless reality TV that just like puts me at ease.
Right.
Love this. Enjoyed this book. It's fascinating. It's really dark and heavy. So like, I'm ready for.
Yeah, it's a great mind exercise, but yeah, we are ready for a little bit lighter content again. So
for sure. Follow us on Instagram at podlygamistpod. You can send us an email at podlygamists pod. Oh, that's my dog. Pod at gmail.com. Like, follow, subscribe, review, any of the things on whatever platform you're listening on. If you could do that, it would be phenomenal. Share it with a friend. Thanks again to all of our friends and family and Australians who support us. We appreciate you so much.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, thanks, Alex, Australia. We won't blow up your last name. Okay.